I appreciate you clicking on this review. I just got done watching Blue Beetle, and with Blue Beetle, we follow the story of the third iteration of Blue Beetle, Jaime Reyes, who after graduating from college comes back home only to be hit with the realities of the world, that and a blue alien scarab attaching to his back, granting him with superpower abilities. That's all pretty much. I'll give any spoilers to you guys. This will be a spoiler-free review. For sure gonna have to talk about spoilers once this movie is released, but for now, let's get spoiler-free into this movie, because man, it has been a long journey for Blue Beetle. I was someone that was first introduced to the character through the cartoon series Batman Brave and the Bold. I remember he was like the first episode out of the show, at least I remember it being that way, and from there I would just see Blue Beetle here and there in different media, you know, in Young Justice, in the Injustice video games, and that eventually pushed me to read some of his comic appearances, and he's a really fun character. So I was absolutely surprised when the previous regime, the heads at Warner Brothers, said, Blue Beetle movie headed your way, but it's gonna go straight to streaming. I was like, what? Why would you do that? That is so odd that at one point that was the plan for DC, is just, let's make big budget superhero movies, but let's basically release them for free online. That's the smart thing to do here, guys. And out of like the three they had planned, only Blue Beetle survived, because Batgirl, canned for tax purposes. The Wonder Twins was like 2 weeks away from filming, then that got canceled. But Blue Beetle made it past everything, and now they had this movie that was built to go straight to streaming. They didn't think it was going to be a big theatrically released film. They rolled the dice and decided, let's just put this in theaters and see if people respond to it. And look, that first trailer, it got me pretty hyped. I'm not gonna lie. I obviously understood some of the criticisms of it looking a little bit cheap, maybe it not looking as high budget as we're used to with a lot of other comic book movies out there. But I felt like even through the trailers, they nailed what Blue Beetle should be in terms of fun and charm and representing some Latino culture. Still, I was very hesitant, and I was preparing myself as a Blue Beetle fan for this film to just get trashed. And now, after having seen the movie, I feel like you have to have woken up on the wrong side of the bed and eaten a soggy sandwich for you to walk out upset with this movie. I think Blue Beetle is a ton of fun, an absolute blast. It is not without its faults, don't get me wrong. This is not comic book movie of the year, but man, I couldn't stop smiling throughout the course of this movie, and it did exactly what a DC film should do. Get me excited for the future of DC. Because if what James Gunn is telling us is true, and what he posted last night at the premiere of Blue Beetle saying, I can't wait for audiences to meet Jaime Reyes, who will be an amazing part of the DCU going forward, I am so looking forward to more Jaime Reyes. Solo Maridueña absolutely shines as this version of the Blue Beetle. He has so much charisma, charm. This is his big screen debut. You know, I remember watching him in the Cobra Kai days, and I still do to this day. Waiting for that final season, Netflix. But he easily transitions into movie star status. All the fun I mainly had with Blue Beetle came from Jaime Reyes. I know this isn't exactly a teenager since it's a college graduate in the movie, but he has all the energy and fun of a teenager who just got their superpowers, who's trying to balance, you know, a normal life with their superhero life. Not to mention also how perfectly this movie showcases the powers of the Blue Beetle and why it would be an exciting superhero. From the different weapons it can conjure up to the sentient scarab, you know, taking over your body and just making you a martial arts expert. And even I think by the end of the movie, they still barely scratch the surface of what this scarab and Blue Beetle can do, that you're left wanting more. But it wasn't just Solo Maridueña that was wonderful in here. The entire Reyes family I fell in love with. Now, some of you guys know I'm Mexican. I grew up in a Hispanic household, and man, had I never felt that scene on the big screen. That's definitely going to make me have a bit of a bias in here, but the way their family dynamic work, from things they would watch on TV, novelas, the music, some of the phrases they would say, it was like literally slapbacks to my childhood and what it was like growing up in my house. That for sure made me connect with the movie a lot more than I expected, and when the film gets to like the emotional parts in here, yeah, they got me. I was teary-eyed. I was holding back tears. The only part of the Latino representation I'm still kind of with is, you know, the whole Spanglish talk. Because I don't know about you guys, but my family, it's Spanish 24/7 in the house. Outside of the house, maybe some English. That's the only part where I was like, okay, I understand you have to do this for mainstream audiences. But I think even as an outsider looking into the Latino household here, you'll really get to like them. I mean, George Lopez is absolutely hilarious in here. He's given a lot to do in the movie and is given most of the jokes. But I think think there's still something there to connect with and for you to get emotionally attached to these characters when stuff gets a little serious. A big topic of debate among superhero films and sometimes DC films is like the visual effects, and I think for the most part, I think the visual effects really rock. Not all of them are absolutely perfect, but I feel like there was a good balance of practical and visual effects in here. Like Jaime Reyes' suit is all a practical effect. Sure, when it's flying up in the air or doing some really crazy stunts, it becomes fully CGI, but I really appreciated that for a lot of the time, it's just a physical suit there with practical lights making it light up and whatnot. It just makes it feel so tangible and badass. Like I couldn't help to look at the suit and go, man, I want to have that thing so bad. Same thing goes here for a lot of the fight scenes. The directors mentioned they took a lot of inspiration from Blue Beetle in the Injustice games and took a lot of those combos and moves in here, and you could definitely feel that. There's some good hand-to-hand combat. I also really want to praise the score. They went with like a techno synthwave score to kind of match the high-tech suit, and to me it ended up fitting really well throughout the movie. Now, before I get into some of my negatives or things I mixed on, last big thing I also want to praise this movie I was mentioning, this film made me excited for the future of the DCU. While watching Blue Beetle, you can easily see how they can connect this movie to a future universe that is yet to be built. You know, because James Gunn keeps saying, yeah, Blue Beetle will be part of it, but Superman Legacy, that's our first DCU movie. There's references to other DC superheroes in here, but they're at such a vague point, they're not really like, oh, that's probably Henry Cavill's Superman, or is that David Cornsweet's Superman? In fact, I feel like Blue Beetle does a good way of treating the DC universe like it's fully existing with heroes. They casually mention off people in different cities and whatnot, and it just makes you feel like, oh, this is a world where other heroes exist. But it's not just for the DC world. Blue Beetle himself, for the longtime Blue Beetle fans, there is a lot of Easter eggs and I would say details about the previous Blue Beetles in this movie. That's one aspect of the movie that kind of shocked me. Ted Kord, who we do get to see as Blue Beetle Bug in all the trailers and whatnot, Ted Kord's shadow is like a large part of this movie. They really want to make it clear to you that this isn't the first Blue Beetle, that there have been previous ones, and there's a mystery going on about where could they be, what happened to them. And all of that just really fills in the world and builds this intrigue that by the time the movie ends, you're like, please make a sequel. I want to see the rest of this story. But okay, with those big positives out of the way, let me be honest now about some of the things that hold this film back. It is very much filled with a lot of cheesy, silly moments. While the film has a lot of heart and charm that's going to make it go a long way than feeling like the average comic book movie, there's still like a couple of cheesy things thrown in there, like with the Nana character that I really did like. I thought she was absolutely funny, but some of it sometimes goes over the top. It's filled with a lot of pep talk speeches about, you can do this, you have it in you. You know, those superhero cliches that you would see in earlier superhero films. And that's the kind of thing you'll notice a lot more. You know, now that we're saturated in a world with hundreds of superhero movies out there, watching Blue Beetle, you'll see some things where you're like, oh, that reminds me of like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. Oh, this family dynamic's a lot like the Shazam movies. Okay, his tech and the way he talks to his suit, that's kind of like Iron Man. And I think that's why you see a lot of people really bringing up the Latino representation and why that was a fun, refreshing thing, because that's what makes it a little bit unique in some of the things that feel very familiar that we've seen in other comic book movies. I also think the villains in here are a little bit one-dimensional and bland. While I think Carpax, his suit, and fight scenes with Blue Beetle are really fun and awesome to watch, they're about as average as you would get for a typical superhero movie. I will say they do one thing towards the end of Carpax's story that I found kind of unexpected, and I was like, oh, that's refreshing. I like that. I'll also say the movie takes a little bit to get going here, while a lot of that is to introduce you to the characters, get you familiar with the family dynamic and some of the issues they're dealing with. I feel like the movie doesn't start to really kick off until Jaime becomes Blue Beetle. But immediately after that, I feel like the movie just gets better and better until it ends, and you hopefully just have a big smile on your face. So look, yeah, as far as like origin story superhero movies go, I think Blue Beetle is really solid. It's not gonna knock it out of the park or be like a legendary contender like the first Iron Man, the first Spider-Man, or Richard Donner's Superman in terms of being like iconic superhero origin stories. To me, the first Blue Beetle movie is really on par with movies like the first Ant-Man, the first Shazam, or The Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton. An extremely solid, well put together origin story that I feel is just a lot of fun and a huge blast to watch. So for Blue Beetle, I'm gonna give Action 3.5 stars. I thought they did a fantastic job with showcasing Blue Beetle's abilities and how he can conjure up all these weapons and also be able to have some some good hand-to-hand fight scenes. But you know, the Reyes family also gets a handful of fight scenes in here, from George Lopez to the dang Nana. Really though, it was that final fight scene. It like reminded me of the final fight scene in Tobey Maguire's first Spider-Man movie. That kind of intensity with updated visual effects. Commenting the movie, I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars. George Lopez had me dying of laughter throughout the movie, but even then, there's a lot of other funny things that go down in here. I feel like it does have a good balance of letting you have those laugh out loud moments, and then when things get serious and dark, they let you breathe into that. They don't try to ruin it with a joke immediately after something serious happens. Drama in the film, I'm gonna give it 3 stars. It's a simple origin story. We have seen this formula done thousands of times. Down on his luck kid gets granted superpowers and goes on the journey to find the hero within him. The Latino representation and Blue Beetle powers help it make it feel a lot more unique, but at the end of the day, we've seen this kind of story before. Horror in the film, I'll give 1 star too, and that has a lot to do with the transformation scene of Jaime becoming Blue Beetle for the first time. I loved the body horror take that they did with this. I think it'll be a little bit unsettling for some younger kids, but I found it to be really gnarly. And suspense in the film, I'll give it 2.5 stars. It's mainly paint by the numbers and a little bit predictable, but even if you can see what's about to happen next, it's still enjoyable. Casual fans into the Blue Beetle world, I'm gonna give it an A-. Cinephiles, I'm gonna give it a B+, and critically, I'm going to give it a B+. When it comes to Blue Beetle, the first superhero in the DCU, I feel like this movie's definitely worth watching in theaters. Again, that's just my opinion on the movie. There are 2 post-credit scenes, guys. I say the first one is worth watching because it teases something in the future. The second post-credit scene, I would suggest you only stay if you grew up in a Mexican or Hispanic household because it's an inside joke. Other than that, you might be really confused on why that was the ending post-credit scene. So I really hope you give Blue Beetle a chance. I'd love to hear your guys' opinions once you got done watching the movie. Did it surprise you? Were you just not fond of it? Would you be wanting to see more of this character? Really, all of it down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.